Okay, this brings me to a funny thought, a story actually, two stories side by side, because, you know, maybe it's nighttime story time. There's an article I read a long time ago about Miguel Duhamel. We all remember who Miguel Duhamel is, right? Great rider. Apparently, Miguel had really exceptional feel, very sensitive to the bike. So somebody made a change on his bike, and I don't know whether he knew about it. I don't know if he knew about it or not, but he was doing one practice, another practice, you know, goes out for the third or the fourth practice or qualifying, whatever it is, and it was on a 600, I remember. And he came in and he said, I can't ride this bike. I can't. This bike is a chopper. It's a chopper. I can't ride the bike. Now, what happened in the session before? Maybe he was doing 42s at whatever racetrack. And now, if you followed him with a helicopter around the racetrack, you know what 42s look like, right? So now he gets on the bike that he can't ride. Now he gets on the bike that's a chopper. Oh my God, it's so much complaining. If you had the same helicopter view and superimposed one on top of the other, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You probably wouldn't. But the thing is, when you're on the track, when you're racing, when you're going that fast, people refer to bikes often as, yeah, he was really on the edge. He was on the edge. That bike handles like a knife. It cuts through, but you know, it's on the edge. I don't find it to be like that at all. I don't find riding hard, riding fast, pushing and pushing, when you're really in the zone, going super fast, I don't find it to be like an edge, like a hard edge. In fact, the faster I go, the more that edge is blurred. It's like a blurred edge, if you will. Think of it like if I'm leaning on this table, right? And it's this is a hard thing, and I have my weight leaning on this table. What if all of a sudden this table started to slide, right? Now this hard edge, this dependable thing that I'm leaning on would start to go like this, right? So racing is a lot like that. You have a hard edge that you feel, and then it goes away. And the best racers, the racers with the best feel, the fastest guys, in my opinion, are the ones that pick up on that point where it goes from like this to that, the instant that hard edge gets blurred. They not only can feel that point where instead of like this, it's kind of swimmy like this. They not only can feel when that edge begins, but they can live there. Racing, going super fast it's all about not having an edge, not being on the edge. It's kind of like a blurry place. It's a beautiful experience. I tell you, it's inspiring. If and when you experience it, you get off the bike and the first thing you want to do is fasten your helmet again and go back out if you're not completely exhausted. But it's one of the reasons why I still race after 3 decades. It's such a beautiful experience, and to be controlling a bike through traffic and through other riders while you're in this blurry place it's amazing. So what Miguel Duhamel was talking about is what the bike felt like at that place. He's not talking about when you're going 60 miles an hour, when he was warming up, he's not talking about when he was doing 44s. He's saying doing 42s before versus doing 42s now. One is so much more of a struggle and probably not able to do 42s, or 42s much more difficultly. Maybe he's doing 42 and a half because he just doesn't have that same control or that same feel. In that blurry place, it's just, there's not as much feedback, or there's not as much, much you can control something that's really not in control, because that's kind of what the blurred edge is about. It's about not having control. It's more of this smooth, blurry thing. So that's Miguel Duhamel. He comes back to the pit. I can't ride the bike, fine. Mechanic goes through the bike and finds that whoever serviced the shock, took it out, put it back in, made it 2 millimeters longer. Just 2 millimeters longer. And he was freaked out. Now, you look at his lap times, well, it was almost identical, right? But it was this feeling. Now, if you slowed down to 45s, probably wouldn't even be able to tell. I wouldn't think you could even tell, right? I couldn't tell. It's just when you get to that point. So some riders, and even some street riders, I met a guy, Jordan Simon, the other day. He bought the 10 millimeter link, the plus 10. I helped him put it on his Superduke. He rode home. He mailed me that night. Oh my God, I can't believe my new bike. It feels like this. So excited, is so enthusiastic and so inspired about $175. That adds 10 millimeters link, and took about 8 minutes to bolt onto his bike. Changed his whole experience. So Jordan, like Miguel Duhamel, very sensitive. The other side of that story is, years ago, back on the East Coast when I raced, I had a Michelin sponsor. I still have a Michelin sponsor here, but there, different guy, Stowe Smead, really cool guy. And I rode big bikes. I had a Ducati 955 at the time, and I would test tires and give him lots of feedback. I'd give him pages and pages of notes. He says to me, I need somebody on a 600. Do you know anybody fast? Do you know anybody fast who rides a 600? So I said, yeah, sure. I have a friend. His name is Jeff. Jeff, by the way, just recently died, so sorry about that. So I said, yeah, I have a friend, Jeff Curtis. I called Jeff. Jeff calls Stowe. We go to the track. Now we're going to test tires. And we're both in the garage together, and we both have notebooks. Stowe gives you a notebook. Here's a notebook. Here's a pen. You take that tire, go ride, come back, tell me what it does. And while you're riding, he's putting different tires on your bike. Okay, now you put a page. All right, a page of notes. At least a page. Put it down. Get the leathers on, take the next one. Go around, come back, sit down again, write the page. So I'm on one table, Jeff's on another table. I'm riding, and Jeff wasn't really riding. he was drinking his Coke or whatever it was, and finally comes over and he says, Go. What are you riding? I was like, what do you mean? What are you riding? I'm riding what the bike does. You know what it feels like. Can you feel the carcass of the tire like moving on an acceleration? Is it gripping? When you grip, is it breaking loose and going sideways, or is it kind of like what? You know, that stuff. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean is the carcass moving, like flexing? Like, what does this mean? So it was a pretty funny experience. And Jeff and Stowe, we all raced together for the whole rest of the year. It was fun. But I'll never forget that, because it teaches you that some people, even Jeff was fast, he beat me sometimes. Some people are less sensitive to things like a 10 millimeter link than other people are. There's a guy who won Supersport on a Ducati this year in Moto America, and apparently he's not exactingly sure about this adjustment and that setting and this height and that length. He's not so sensitive about that. Yet there's other riders, like you talk to Doug Chandler, he can talk to you about the numbers of his setup about a bike that he rode for Kajiva in 500 Grand Prix so many years ago. And he can still talk about numbers and settings and offsets of triple clamps. And so it's a long story, but the point is the faster you go, the more you'll feel these subtle differences at that blurry place. But having said that, you're still also going to feel them on the street. And it depends on your sensitivity. Maybe you'll feel them a lot, maybe you'll feel them a little, but there is a difference, right? So maybe that has an impact on which link you would get, a +10 or a +20, or maybe which gearing you would choose or where you want the bike. But you got to experiment and find out for yourself. But it's a lot of fun. It's part of the experience of motorcycling. So you have the racetrack feel, right? And then you have the street feel, and you're like, I don't know, maybe I don't really need that stuff. Maybe it's not really going to be that much of a difference. Maybe 106.7 millimeters of trail versus 104, I'm not really going to feel that much. Maybe the swing arm length, not going to be that much of an impact. Here's another story for you. I raced this bike in the AFM, 1290 Superduke R 2020. My friend Gavin, who helps with the development of these links, he's a rocket scientist, literally, he also races the same bike, same year, same everything. And I had to jump on him because I've raced these bikes for 15 years. So Gavin just bought his bike last year, middle of last year. So naturally he says, I want to know which shock you do, I want to know your swing arm length, I want to know everything. And Gavin's a numbers guy. He loves things like this chart, loves them. So he just wants to start at my base setting. So he did. He got the same spring rate front, same spring in the rear, it mimicked everything. And all year long, one of the things that Gavin has complained about is wheeling. He can't keep the front wheel down. And I'm saying, well, I don't get it, Gavin. Like, you've got the same, he uses my ride height tool. And he uses the Superlink. He helped develop the Superlink. So he's got the same linkage, he's got the same ride height, he's got the same springs, everything's the same. But he can't stop wheeling. And maybe I get into a little more of a tuck than him, but I'm driving out of turns hard. In fact, when I come back from races, people will say, competitors will say, what the fuck about how you get out of turns? Like, I don't even understand it. You're accelerating, not just accelerating before they are, but so much harder before they are, so much earlier. So what is it? And if I'm able to do that, it means that, well, the anti-squat, right, from the swing arm angle and the ride height, all that stuff, but it also means, like, if I can drive that hard, I'm not wheeling. And I know I'm not, because I'm not. So a month ago, I set out to do this 2-hour project, and it probably took 2 weeks solid work. And I found that while we both have a 16-tooth countershaft sprocket and a 41-tooth rear sprocket, we had different length chains. I had a 114 link chain, he had a 112 link chain. Because I know from experience, you want to get the eccentric back and down as far as you can. So that's why immediately I went to a longer chain. But apparently I forgot to tell Gavin. So here's where we were different. 1641 is what we both had. Gavin had 1641 with a 112 link chain, which gave him 596 millimeter swing arm length. It also made his ride height 305, and you say 305 from stock 301, doesn't matter, because Gavin, like me, has a ride height adjustable shock. You just undo this little nut here, right here, this locking nut, and you can spin the bottom of the shock in or out to make it longer or shorter. And to be able to use that shock, he also has this Superlink, which has this cool shape so the shock can get longer and shorter, which it doesn't work on the OEM control arm. You have to have this control arm. So Gavin has the same control arm that I do and the same ride height adjustable shock. So even though that gearing change would have made him have a little more ride height. Doesn't matter because he just adjusted the shock till he had the same ride height as me, 333 millimeters. But the difference is I had 1641 114 links. So I had a 610 millimeter swing arm and he had a 596 millimeter swing arm. So do the math there. 10 plus 4.3 is 11, right? So 14.3 millimeters longer. My swing arm was 14.3 millimeters longer than Gavin's. So when you go back to this drawing and you think like, here's the rear wheel, here's the front wheel, here's the center of gravity, this big circular Michelin man. Oh, it's a Michelin man. So when you're talking about moving this axle back 14.3 millimeters, relative to the size of this motorcycle, like where is that? There? So that means the wheel is going to be like, that's not that different. That's a big difference. That's a big difference. Again, when you get to that blurred edge, if there even is such a thing as a blurred edge, that threshold, that balancing point where you're really close to there, but you're a little bit this side of it or a little bit that side of it, 14.3 millimeters is a big difference. So that 14.3 millimeters means I could drive out of turn so much harder than he could. So the clock face, I was down at like 2 o'clock and he was up at like 11 o'clock. That was the difference. So it does make a difference in the real world, real riding, in the real experiences, not just on the track. I mean, we were riding on the track, but not always full speeds, and he's still having these problems. I want to help you understand better when it would be inappropriate to use the plus 10 millimeter link or the plus 20 millimeter link. Or if you have the super link, like what kind of ride height, wheelbase kind of a thing do you think you want? Like what would be beneficial? So when you think about the clock, right? And you can consider these charts that I made now, which is great. And again, you can get them off superduked.com. So when you look at the chart and you look at where your gearing is, right? You can see on the arc, if you're way down by like 2 o'clock, I think it goes to 2:15. If you're way down there, down means up. Sorry that that's confusing. I can show you the chart in 2 ways. One showing exactly the effect of height, right? As you rotate it back, the bike gets higher. Or you can think of it exactly like a clock and just understand that when you go back and down, the bike is going up. However you want to do it, I got both charts there, so you can choose which one that you relate to better. But so if you're already, again, stock is pretty much the lowest it can go. Stock is 301.9. I think the lowest measurement at the highest part of the arc is like 301. So it's 1 millimeter taller than it could be. It could be even 1 millimeter lower, 0.9 millimeter lower. So if you have stock gearing, that's the most appropriate time to do the plus 20. And I know a lot of people have bought the plus 20. More people have bought the plus 20s than the plus 10s because bigger, better. You know, people are nuts. You know, I can understand because I'm actually 333 millimeters. That's where I race at, and stock is 301 millimeters. So I'm 31 millimeters higher than stock. That's where I race the bike. And I think people hear that and they say, well, yeah, I'm getting the plus 20 then, which maybe that makes sense, you know, but it all depends on your feel. It really does. Remember, Miguel Duhamel, Jeff Curtis. Remember the feeling. You know, Doug Chandler and Super Sport guy won the championship. Like, everybody's different. So if your bike is the lowest, maybe a plus 20 is more appropriate than the plus 10. Who knows? But if you have changed gearing and you're all the way down in the stroke and you've already pushed the bike up 9 millimeters or 8 millimeters, maybe you don't want to use the plus 20 because then you'd be at 28 millimeters, which is only 2 millimeters lower than I ride at the track. So I ride it pretty radical and I don't have a lot of trail, and I don't even like that I have that little trail, which is why the next project is going to be offset triple clamps. I didn't even want to plan on talking about that, but I'm going to make offset triple clamps for this bike. Maybe 2 months, I'll be ready. And that's going to make, we'll have adjustable trail, adjustable offsets. We can have any trail we want. But for now, I don't think if you've already added height with your gearing that you want to go plus 10. If that's the case, you probably would want to use plus 10, right? It makes sense. The last thing I want to say is, and this is interesting and intriguing, and it's worth thought for safety reasons, but it takes drawing a picture. My buddy Gavin, the rocket scientist, explained this to me yesterday in such a cool way. I'm going to try to repeat it for you. It's about stability, right? How something will react, your motorcycle will react to a change, a sudden change, right? So something that's very stable, let's say the bike has a lot of trail, right? And remember, when we say the more trail the bike has, the more it wants to go straight, which means, you know, I had a big crazy bump, railroad tracks while you leaned over, whatever it is that happens, and the bike gets upset like this, a bike with more trail is going to right itself, like it's going to take that impact, be upset, and calm itself down automatically quicker than a bike that has a shorter trail. So if you looked at it on a scale, it's like, let's say you're going in this direction, right? And something upsetting happens, and the bike reacts and reacts, and then it's steady again. I hope you can see this. So you're going along, bang, impact, and it rights itself, right? The more stable something is as it's going, the less it's going to be impacted at first, and the quicker it's going to be stable again, right? So maybe when your forks get a little steeper, it's more like this. And maybe when you have a lot of trail, it's more like this. It's not, if you look at the center line, right, and this center line, the distance here, how much it got upset. This one, let's say this is less trail, and this is more trail. Less trail got more upset and took longer to get right again. More trail got less upset, this distance and this are less, and it got right quicker. Right? That makes sense. So let me give you this analogy that Gavin gave me last night. He's such a smart guy. I love me some Gavin. Gavin said, don't laugh at my drawings. Gavin said you take a commercial airliner, right? That's like this. Don't laugh at my drawings. Right? It's got this big long wing. I know it looks like Shamu or something. And then it has this other wing that goes over here, right? So the distance between this big wing here and this wing back here makes, and the long plane and the weight and all this stuff, makes it so that when this plane hits turbulence, boom, there's crazy turbulence, it's going to upset the plane a little bit. You feel it, right? The plane is gonna go like, oh, I'm upset, a little bit like this, and then it's gonna level out again because it's very stable. But the downside of something that's so stable as a 747 airliner is you see a pilot and if he wants to avoid something, maybe he's getting low and there's a mountaintop or something, you go like this and the plane's like, it's gonna turn about this fast, right? So he yanks back on the yoke and the plane's, it's gonna lift about this fast. Very stable means very slow. Very stable means, I mean, the pilot could have a heart attack and die, and without autopilot, like that plane is just gonna keep flying. It's just gonna keep going, and 13 miles later, eventually it's gonna hit the ground, right? I mean, not exactly, but you get the point. The plane wants to go straight, just like a motorcycle with a lot of trail wants to go straight. Now, this is where it gets fun. Now think about an F-16. I'm terrible at drawing F-16s, but let's say it looks kind of like, I don't even know what an F-16 looks like. Well, let's say it's like that, okay? An F-16, from what Gavin explained to me yesterday, is so unstable when it flies that it has a whole computer system inside of it that helps keep the plane true and flying properly. The pilot hits turbulence and he's not like, whoa, 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 like this. Like the computer controls a little bit, but definitely when this plane hits turbulence, the computer's, the pilot, he doesn't care. He's not doing anything to recover from turbulence because the plane's just gonna right itself, right? This guy's a little more susceptible. I mean, look at Top Gun, the first version of Top Gun. He got some sort of turbulence from the dogfighting and the thing's like this. So from what Gavin explained to me, if you took the computer control out and threw a bunch of turbulence at this plane and the pilot wasn't able to recover, that plane is just gonna go like this and drop like a stone, like this pen, like that. This little plane, this little F-16 is not self-righting. It's not slow reacting, but that's by design. They make it this way on purpose because they need to dogfight. Like take an F-16 and it just goes like this, right? Take an F-16 and you turn so fast it'll snap your neck. The price that you pay for having something that's that quick and agile is instability, right? So that's an extreme analogy. So this is the airliner going through a turbulence. This is the F-16. Whoa, like this. And without recovering, it's craziness, right? So there's a big difference. That example is extreme. Obviously, we're not creating that much of a difference by raising the rear ride height and making our trail go from 106.7 to 103 or whatever, wherever you would be, depending on whatever link you use. We're not going from an airliner to a fighter jet, but we are making a change. And we are making the bike less stable by making the change. You want the thing to handle like a Cadillac, let's knock yourself out. That's the way it comes stock. You want the thing to handle like a cat, well, cats can be a little flighty, right? So the reason I bring this up is because that's where steering dampeners come in, right? When the bike is unstable, when you're leaned over and you hit bumps and the bike goes like this, a bike with shorter trail is gonna have more of a tendency to get a head shake, to be unstable, right? So I have a Mupo steering dampener. I love it. It's got great control. A couple of clicks and you really feel the difference. Even in the pits, like 3 clicks out and I can move fine like this. A couple more clicks in, oh, it's getting hard. one or two clicks too many and I can't even turn the bars. It's got a lot of control. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody or anything, but I have also had the WP steering dampener, and it came in, I mounted it, I did this stuff, and it came off, I put it back in the box, and see you later. I don't want it anymore because I couldn't feel a big difference. I had the same experience with the WP shock, to tell you the truth. Like, I couldn't find the control so much. And maybe it just needs to be revalved, right? Different shim stack or something, fine. In fact, that's what Gavin did. But, so a good steering dampener. But believe it or not, you can even change the oil in your stock steering dampener, because the stock steering dampener, I think, it doesn't do anything. I don't feel it doing anything. So I raced for a full season a few years ago, not with the Gen 3. I raced for a full season with the Gen 2 with the stock steering dampener, where I unscrewed the face of it, poured the oil out, poured new oil in. It was a little bit clunky getting the thing back together without air bubbles in it. But I could do it. And if I could do it, I'm a carpenter. And like, I bring this tool to the racetrack with me all the time. So if I could do that to that steering dampener using this mentality, you could do it. Your mom could probably do it. But the point is, it does help to have more control. Change your oil, thicker oil. It's going to be like a race steering dampener, really. Or, you know, get an aftermarket dampener. I shouldn't say don't get the WP, but there you go. What I will say for reference, if it helps to understand, because this is all like, you know, I'm using these telling stories and using measurements, and it's like, how does this relate to me? In the real world, you might be thinking, like, because I have a street bike in the garage, I'm gonna go ride. Do I have to worry about instability now? Like, or do I have to worry about how Michael Rudder seemed like he was sagging in the turns? Like, am I not gonna be able to make a turn? I'm speaking from a very sensitive place. I'm a very sensitive guy. When I talk about things like big, maybe you wouldn't even feel like they're big, right? But I do. So to help you relate to these stories and even my little talk about steering dampeners, since I have raced the Gen 3 Superduke, it's like 2.5 seasons now that I've been racing this bike, and bumpy tracks, fast tracks, tight tracks, going through the corkscrew at Laguna Seca, going off the track, wheeling over alligator, stand-up wheelies and landing at 130 miles an hour. I have never, ever once, ever experienced a head shake. I've never had an unstable moment ever. And I run this bike steeper than you can with either the plus 10 or the plus 20, even at the highest gearing combination, plus 20 plus the highest combination, you're still not as high as I raced the bike at, and I've never had head shake. Maybe that's because I have an excellent steering dampener. I don't know. I didn't always have it, but I can't say because I've never had head shake. So that's how you put it into perspective. But to be safe, to be wise, to be responsible, I would get a steering dampener, right? Because you really should have one anyway. Especially if you're going fast. You never know what you're gonna hit. Okay, so in closing, I would like to say that if you have questions or anything, you can just put a comment below, and I do a pretty good job of responding to comments, or you can email me. People have. If you're interested in the data sheets that I made, the clock face and these graphs and charts and all this stuff, they will be on superduked.com, where I sell these links, where I'm gonna sell the ride height tool, and you'll just be able to download them for free. It's just for free. I wanna close by saying thank you, because some of you have been really cool on social media and in the comments of the videos, and very supportive and appreciating the help that I have offered, and I love it. I love helping you guys figure your bikes out and get, you know, more out of your motorcycle, more out of your riding, and more out of just motorcycling in general. It's kind of cool that you do things together, right? You feel like you're not so alone out there on your bike. Like there's a whole network of people behind you, and it's a beautiful thing. So there you go. I hope you appreciate all this data. I hope you appreciate this talk. I hope it helps you and benefits you. And until next time,